Many unfairly dismiss the first 2 seasons. Granted, not every episode was a masterpiece.
I'm not quite sure if congratulations are in order, Commander, but you're pregnant.
However, episodes such as Breaking the Ice, Shuttlepod 1, Carbon Creek, and Stigma, to name just a few, are legitimately great. The hits far outweigh the misses.
We're going to stumble, make mistakes, I'm sure more than a few before we find our footing. But we're going to learn from those mistakes. That's what being human is all about.
Any long-running franchise will inevitably contradict its own continuity, and Star Trek is certainly no exception. Enterprise even occasionally contradicted itself. The series would sometimes walk a fine line when it came to established canon. In Acquisition, Enterprise encounters a group of Ferengi, though the species isn't named on screen in order to preserve their first appearance in the Next Generation episode The Last Outpost. Technically, Acquisition depicts humanity's second encounter with the Ferengi, following the events of the Deep Space Nine episode Little Green Men. Regeneration serves as both a sequel to First Contact and a prequel to the Next Generation episode Q Who.
This is Captain.
You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile.
The ending directly foreshadows the Borg's presence in the Next Generation.
Sounds to me like we've only postponed the invasion until what? The 24th century?
Both of these encounters proved controversial with some fans. Personally, I find if the story is compelling enough, I can overlook the odd inconsistency. Back in 2001, executives were somewhat understandably nervous at the idea of a prequel to a successful sci-fi franchise. In order to satisfy their desire for a more futuristic element, Berman and Braga created the Temporal Cold War, not to be confused with the Time War from Doctor Who. Originally, this story arc was intended to unfold over several years. However, the concept quickly began to lose steam, and was somewhat abruptly resolved in the 2-part Season 4 premiere, Stormfront. Ultimately, the war featured in 13 episodes across the series' 4 seasons. One faction in the war was the Suliban Cabal, though the episode Detained made it clear the Cabal did not represent the entire Suliban race.
The Cabal doesn't make decisions on its own. They're simply soldiers fighting a temporal Cold War.
Temporal? You've lost me.
They're taking orders from the distant future.
Led by John Fleck as Silic, the Cabal took its orders from a mysterious figure from the 28th century, who fans rather creatively dubbed Future Guy. The figure's true identity was never revealed on screen. However, various fan theories have emerged over the years, including the suggestion that this was in fact Archer himself.
Please, repeat what you said! I said you're an ugly bastard.
Braga seemingly confirmed this theory via Twitter in 2012. However, he and Berman had previously stated that the character was probably going to be a Romulan. Coldfront introduced the character of Daniels, a temporal agent from the 31st century, played by Matt Winston.
I work for a different kind of organization. We make sure that people like Silic don't interfere with historical events.
I've never heard of a group like that.
That's because it doesn't exist yet.
Daniels appeared in 8 episodes, where he assisted the crew in protecting the timeline from temporal incursions. The Season 2 finale, The Expanse, changed the direction of the series. Enterprise was recalled to Earth following an unprovoked attack which killed 7 million people. This incident kick-started the Xindi Crisis. With the exception of a few standalone episodes, the entire 3rd season was devoted to this story arc.
And now the stakes have gotten a lot bigger. Weight of the world trip. Literally.
For many, this was when the series started to come into its own. In fact, some suggest new viewers skip the first 2 seasons altogether. Personally, I believe the shift in tone loses a lot of its impact without the context of those first 2 seasons. The desperation of the crew's mission is contrasted by their prior innocence and naivety. Being a prequel, Earth's fate was never seriously in question. The tension doesn't lie in whether or not the crew will succeed, but rather in how much they will have to sacrifice and compromise in order to do so.
I'm about to step over a line. A line I thought I would never cross. And given the nature of our mission, it probably won't be the last.
Episodes such as Twilight and E² explore possible futures and alternate timelines. This season pushed the crew to their breaking point and beyond. Trip in particular was forced to come to terms with the death of his sister Elizabeth.
She's dead. So are 7 million others. She was no more important than any of them.
She was more important to you. There's nothing wrong with admitting that.
The Xindi attack was seen by many as a thinly veiled allegory for the September 11 attacks, which occurred a mere 2 weeks before Enterprise premiered. Connor Trenier has said he got to deal with 9/11 in Season 3. This arc also introduced the MACOs, Military Assault Command Operations. Their presence aboard Enterprise caused tension between Malcolm as the ship's armory officer and the MACO's commanding officer, Major Hayes, played by Stephen Culp.
Why won't you let me do my job?
Because you're here to enhance the combat capacity of this crew, not take over security.
Culp had appeared in a deleted scene in the film Star Trek Nemesis the previous year. The Xindi, a race comprised of 5 distinct species, aquatics, arboreals, insectoids, primates, and reptilians, were another interesting addition to the franchise. The events of Season 3 had a lasting effect on both the characters and the series itself.
You've changed, Captain. And that it all for the better.
The heightened stakes, increasingly difficult choices, and character development make the 3rd season my personal favourite. However, most people consider Season 4 to be the series' best, due to its explicit connections to the wider franchise. This season even canonised elements of Star Trek the Animated Series.
How long before it starts to lose interest in us?
Days. At least.
Personally, I don't think a prequel has to overtly connect to what has come before, which is probably one reason why I actually like the film Prometheus. In contrast to the season-long Xindi arc, Season 4 featured various mini-arcs, each lasting 2 or 3 episodes, as well as the occasional standalone episode. Borderland, Cold Station 12 and The Augments saw Brent Spiner return to the franchise as Dr. Arik Sung, an ancestor of Dr. Noonien Sung, the cyberneticist who created Data.
Permission to come aboard, sir?
Sung's final scene was a little on the nose.
Perfecting humanity may not be possible. Cybernetics. Artificial life forms.
This arc also revolved around a group of augments, genetically engineered humans from the eugenics wars.
Are you familiar with the name Botany Bay?
It's a penal colony on the shores of Australia.
It's also the name of a pre-war vessel, launched at the end of the Great Wars. The ship carried many of our brethren, including Khan Noonien Singh.
Affliction and Divergence addressed the inconsistency of the Klingons' physical appearance in the original series compared to the rest of the franchise.
Those are Klingons?
All right. You boys have had enough.
Mr. Worf?
They are Klingons, and it is a long story.
It was also revealed in these episodes that Malcolm had previously worked for an early version of Section 31. Though the organisation's name was never stated on screen, the origin of said name was revealed.
Reread the Charter, Article 14, Section 31. There are a few lines that make allowances for bending the rules during times of extraordinary threat.
The 2-part episode, In a Mirror Darkly, was set entirely in the Mirror universe.
According to some theories, everything that exists in our universe should also exist there.
These episodes not only served as a prequel to the original series episode Mirror Mirror, but also a sequel to the Tholian Web.
The Tholians quantum dated a piece of the hull. The ship is not only from another universe, it's from another time. About 100 years into the future.
The opening scene revisits the ending of First Contact, with a slight twist.
Board their ship! Take everything you can!
These episodes even featured an alternate title sequence depicting the rise of the Terran Empire. The 4th season also set up the formation of the Coalition of Planets, a forerunner to the United Federation of Planets.
The final frontier begins in this hall. Let's explore it together.
This storyline culminated in the penultimate two-parter, Demons and Terra Prime. In these episodes, the final obstacle in forming the Coalition proves to be humanity itself, in the form of a xenophobic organisation called Terra Prime. Their leader, John Frederick Paxton, played by Peter Weller, was presumably an ancestor of Fleet Admiral Alexander Marcus.
War is coming, and who's gonna lead us? You?
These episodes were surprisingly emotional and wrapped up a number of major arcs, providing thematic closure to the series. The series finale, These Are the Voyages, infamously takes place during the Next Generation episode, The Pegasus. The events of the episode are actually a holodeck program being run by Will Riker and Deanna Troi, with Marina Sirtis and Jonathan Frakes reprising their roles. As fun as this idea sounds, it is rather jarring watching the pair desperately trying to look a decade younger.
A lot of things can change in 12 years.
This gimmick was met with harsh criticism from both fans and the series cast. The intention had been to pay tribute to Star Trek as a whole, which at that point had been consistently on the air in one form or another for 18 years.
Here's to the next generation.
Sadly, the episode is easily one of the series' worst. Trip's sacrificial death not only felt completely unnecessary, but wildly out of character, and was clearly included for shock value.
There's just one other thing I need to tell you. You can all go straight to hell.
Of course, given that the events depicted in this episode are actually a holographic recreation more than 200 years after the fact, one can easily question their authenticity. Admittedly, having Riker assume the role of the never-seen chef was a clever payoff to that gimmick, even if his interactions with the characters did directly influence the program. Thankfully, the final scene between Archer and T'Pol is legitimately touching.
You look very heroic.
Many, including Manny Koto, consider Demons and Terra Prime to be the series' true finale. Right from its earliest days, Star Trek has been somewhat obsessed with sex. Enterprise was no exception. The series often found convoluted reasons for characters, both male and female, to remove or lose items of clothing.
Whatever you're about to say, I don't want to hear it. Just get me a shirt.
The worst offender was the ship's infamous decontamination chamber. On paper, the decon chamber makes sense, given the series' early placement in the timeline. However, its true purpose was inescapably clear. Granted, these scenes were toned down after the pilot.
Is this really necessary?
T'Pol in particular was often forced into restricting and revealing outfits, just as 7 of 9 had been on Voyager. As a Vulcan, many of these outfits were, shall we say, highly illogical. T'Pol was only seen wearing the standard duty uniform on 2 occasions, despite officially joining Starfleet at the beginning of Season 4.
That uniform doesn't suit you, Captain.
I doubt you traveled all this way to criticize my attire.
Despite often being ahead of its time, Star Trek hasn't always been quite as progressive as it aspires to be. Thankfully, the series did occasionally demonstrate some self-awareness.
With respect, Captain, I wonder if you would be so determined to find this apparition if it were a scantily clad man.
Enterprise was the first Star Trek series to be cancelled since the original. The series aired its final episode just 16 months before the franchise's 40th anniversary. Despite this legacy, Enterprise has been repeatedly acknowledged in subsequent iterations.
I'm sorry I'm late. I was watching the first Enterprise on the holodeck. You know, Archer and those guys. What a story. Those guys had a long road getting from there to here.
Star Trek Nemesis, the 4th and final film featuring the cast of the Next Generation, was released partway through Enterprise's 2nd season. The film made reference to the USS Archer, a subtle acknowledgement which helped solidify the series' position within the franchise. Enterprise later echoed this by naming a Romulan character after one of the warbirds from the film. The series also featured Remans, a species introduced in Nemesis in the Season 4 episodes United and the Enar. In 2009, former Doctor Who showrunner Russell T Davies revealed that he had been interested in a crossover between the two series, which would have seen the TARDIS land aboard Enterprise.
How can a ship be bigger on the inside than the outside?
Just how realistic this prospect was is debatable. Regardless, Enterprise's cancellation ended any possibility of it happening. Prior to the series' cancellation, a number of storylines were already in development for a potential 5th season. Some of these had direct connections to episodes of the original series and the animated series. An unused concept by Doug Drexler would have seen Enterprise undergo a major refit, bringing its design closer to the original Constitution-class starship. A physical model of this refit, dubbed the SS Enterprise, was released as part of Star Trek: The Official Starships collection in 2016. Season 5 would have likely explored the build-up to the Earth-Romulan War, first mentioned in the original series episode Balance of Terror. A follow-up to Regeneration would have explored the origins of the Borg Queen, with Alice Kriege reprising the role once again. The production team were also interested in revisiting the Mirror Universe following the events of In a Mirror Darkly.
You're speaking with Empress Sato. Prepare to receive instructions.
Star Trek Enterprise was far from a perfect series. Nevertheless, it's probably the version of Star Trek that I personally connect with the most. The series propelled the franchise forward by examining its past. It feels like the missing link between our modern world and Gene Roddenberry's utopian vision of the future. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know which Star Trek series is your favourite and why. While our opinions may vary, in the words of Captain Jean-Luc Picard,
let's make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise.
If you enjoyed this video, why not give it a like? Maybe share it with a friend or an enemy. Either way, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to see more content here on Channel 73.